Cherie here, and thank you for joining me for part 5 of the Zadok calendar in the Dead Sea Scrolls series. I am picking up almost mid-sentence from part 4, so if you haven't watched the part 4 video, then please do so now, because this study expects that you already understand what was previously presented as the foundation and builds upon what will be in this study. Now we will look at the various Enoch calendars and compare the major differences and similarities with the Zadok calendar. I will also go more in depth regarding the intercalation of the Zadok calendar specifically. 360 degrees and 360 solar days. I agree that the stellar cycle is 360 degrees, which is divided by the 12 constellations, creating 30 degrees for each constellation, which gives us a stellar calendar number of 30 days. However, it seems highly significant that 7 is the only number which cannot be evenly divided into 360. As you can see, 360 divided by 1, all the way to 360 divided by 10, all the numbers go in evenly, except for the significant number of 7. 360 divided by 7 equals 51.4285712. When Yah established a calendar using a 7-day week as the backbone of calculation at creation, and then he established his feast days also around the number 7, taught us to count by sevens, and then swears oaths, of which the root word is 7, to his people. And then we discover that the number 7 won't fit into a 360-day cycle. This should really stand out and be highly significant to feast-keeping Israelites. In fact, the next number divisible by 7 is 364. Which just happens to be the exact number which the vernal equinox points us towards when it has clearly just passed the point of origin on the 365th day and is now moving in the opposite direction of the luminary cycles. It's like a neon road sign saying, the perfect stellar and solar year agree on 364 days. Like Yeshua, the Son of Righteousness, the Son tells us every year to turn back to the covenant oath of perfection represented by the number 7. The stars also form the basis of the calculation for the royal cubit, which is 360 times 7, which equals 2,520 or 25.2 inches. 2,520 is also the meaning of Mene Tekel Upharsin, which is the handwriting on the wall when Daniel is called to explain why there's a hand writing these words on the wall. When those words written on the wall are translated not as verbs, but as nouns, they represent units of measurement or money, which is 2,520. And on May 2nd and 3rd of 2019, the Jewish state of Israel will have been a nation for 25,920 days, which, if you'll recall, is the cycle of the great year in the precession of the equinoxes. The numbers 2,520 and 25,920 are also closely related as units of calculation, which is based on the stars. The heavens declare Yah's glory. Let's consider another solar phenomena associated with the equinoxes. During a normal 365-day year, the autumnal equinox occurs 187 solar days after the vernal equinox, which divides the solar year. However, on average, every 4th year, the autumnal equinox will occur 188 solar days after the vernal equinox, indicating that there will be a total of 366 days in that solar year. Recall that the stellar cycle is 360 degrees, and 360 divided by 2 is 180 degrees, which is 1/2 of the stellar year cycle. The solar year cycle of 187 minus the stellar cycle of 180 equals 7 days difference in a normal year between 1/2 of the stellar and 1/2 of the solar cycles. But get this, every 4th year, there is an 8th day. 188 minus 180 equals 8. Yeshua, the door in the 4th year, opens the way into the 8th day, or everlasting life. The number 8, when written horizontally, is also the symbol for eternity. And if that isn't amazing enough, you can always determine which day of the week the vernal equinox will occur by simply adding 4 weekdays to the autumnal equinox. So if the autumnal equinox occurs on a Friday, add 4 days, and you know that the next vernal equinox will be on Tuesday. If the autumnal equinox is on Saturday, like it was in 2018, then you know that the vernal equinox will occur on Wednesday. During normal years, the same method works vice versa for the autumnal equinox. In 2018, the vernal equinox was on Tuesday, and the autumnal equinox was 4 days later on Saturday. However, every 4th year, there are 5 days difference instead of 4 days between the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox, which creates the 8th day, or the 188th day. So 5 is the number which represents mercy. 4 represents the door, and 8 represents eternity. So the door of mercy opens to eternity. The Zadok priests would have understood the significance of the sun and stars declaring the promised Messiah and pointing to when he would appear and what he would accomplish. In fact, 1/2 of 364 is 182. If you'll recall, Yeshua died on the cross and resurrected during the 82nd Jubilee cycle from creation. Let's look at the 4 intercalary days. Without the 4 intercalary days, representing the 4 seasonal changes, the entire 7-day backbone of the calendar is broken. There is 0 reason for observing a 7-day weekly cycle apart from the story of creation. The fact that Yah Elohim created the world in 7 days is why mankind observes the 7-day cycle. It's Yah's mark of authority, along with everything that he specifically established using the number 7. Some of you may recall when I talked about the significance of Yah making 7-fold promises in the Covenant of Fire Part 2 video. Only Yah is able to make and keep a 7-fold promise or oath, Shavua. The pagan cultures all followed the luminary cycles, which they observed because it seemed right in their own eyes, and because it was the highest objects that they could observe. That's the highest that they could imagine God being and what he might look like. However, Yah's feast-keeping believers understand the significance of 7 as his sign and seal of authority on earth. The 4 intercalary days represent the 4 yearly solar phenomena and are important to keep from breaking the cycle of 7 days in the biblical year. 360 plus 4 equals 364 and is perfectly divisible by 7. 364 divided by 7 equals 52 perfect weeks in 1 year. 5 plus 2 again gives us 7. If you were to intercalate a full 7 days based on the vernal equinox, in 144 years, there would be 26 intercalations of 7 days each. And in 294 years, or what is known as a priestly jubilee cycle of 49 times 6, there would be 53 years of intercalary days. 52 weeks plus 1. 52 plus 1. 5 plus 2 is 7 plus 1 is 8. Is all of this just a coincidence? Yeshua is the door to salvation. John 14:6, and Yeshua said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the door. No one gets through except through him. In John 6:45, it is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by Elohim. Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. If you've learned the way of the stars, the story of salvation in the constellations, it leads you to the door of Yeshua. Revelation 22:14, blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. Yeshua is the door to salvation. Acting as the 365th day, he points us to the will of the Father. Yeshua is frequently compared to the sun, the great light, which was placed in the heavens on the 4th day to establish the signs for seasons, for days, and for years. We see that Yeshua appeared at the end of the 4th day, or the end of 4,000 years from creation, to establish the door to the Father, so that those who believe in him may enter into the kingdom of heaven and into eternity on the 8th day as his adorned bride. The entire story is written into the stars and the solar cycle. Archaeologists in Israel discovered the seal of King Hezekiah, which shows a sun with 2 wings, along with the ancient symbol of life and resurrection, which resembles a man on the stake or the cross. In Malachi 4:2 we read, but unto you that fear my name, the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, will arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. The Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings. It is abundantly clear that the teachings of ancient Israel were radically transformed after Hellenism infiltrated Judea. The Aaronic priests were deposed and replaced by the political class of the Pharisees and the oral law. The times and laws were indeed changed, as Daniel prophesied would occur. The 4th gate. I believe that Enoch is clear that the year must enter in through the 4th gate, which means that the vernal equinox must occur before the end of the 364th day of the biblical year. So Abib 1 cannot begin in gate 3. Here are some quotes from Enoch 1, chapter 72, 5 through 6. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and the sun goes down from the heaven and returns through the north in order to reach the east, and is so guided that he comes to that portal and shines in the face of the heaven. In this way, he rises in the 1st month in the great portal, which is the 4th of those 6 portals in the east. I do not believe that Enoch is saying that the year begins immediately following an equinox. He merely states that it begins in the 4th gate. He doesn't mention equal day or equal night as the sign to begin the year, only that month 1 begins in the 4th gate. This makes sense because the equinox shifts days, but as I showed in the Zadok calendar part 2 video, the 31st or intercalary days all serve the primary purpose of not shifting the seasons forward by 1 day, as do the 4 intercalary days at the end of the year. Therefore, never shifting the week seems to be very important for maintaining the creation week format. In Enoch 82, verse 4, we read, "In the reckoning of all their days in which the sun traverses the heavens, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, with the heads of thousands of the order of the stars, together with the four which are intercalated, which divide the four portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them 4 days." So the 4 intercalary days, or the 4 seasonal days, enter in before the days of the month begin. Enoch 82, verses 11 through 12. Their 4 leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year enter first, and after them the 12 leaders of the order who divide the months. And for the 360 days there are heads over thousands who divide the days, and for the 4 intercalary days there are leaders which sunder the 4 parts of the year. And these heads over thousands are intercalated between leader and leader, each behind a station, but their leaders make the division. Now, if you'll recall the 6 gates in video part 3, the 6 gates have 7 dividers. And above them, you can see that there is a tabernacle for the sun, the 12 constellations. And on the equinoxes, the sun shines in the constellations, providing us with a measurement of time for the millennia, which we know that Yah uses as a day. A day is as 1,000 years. So you'll see that there's 7 days, 7 feasts, and 7 lights. Israel was freed from Egypt in the 4th gate under the blood of the sacrificed lamb on the doorposts, which occurred on the 14th day. 7 times 2 equals 14. The equinoxes cross the 3rd and the 4th gate 2 times every year. The number 14 is the number 1 plus 4, which equals 5. And of course, 5 represents mercy and grace. Shavuot is the covenant feast, represented by the middle candlestick, which requires the calculation of 7s, or 7 times 7. Yeshua is the door to the covenant, gate 4, which points us to the Father's plan of salvation in the stars. Yah's people walk in the covenant of 7. We are set apart by Yah's 7ing oath. We are walking by faith and not by sight. We read in Deuteronomy 4:19, "Unless thou lift up, or nasa, thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship," or shakah, beseech or reverence, to seek out or reverence, to worship them and serve, abad them, which Yah thy Elohim hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. There is nothing special about the sun and the moon and the stars, because he's given them to all the nations under the heavens. Why would you worship them? He's given them to everyone. They don't make you separate or set apart in any way. Now, you may recall the word abad from the Covenant of Fire Part 1 video. To abad the earth was to serve the flesh. When Adam was created to abad Yah Elohim before he sinned through disobedience. Again in Deuteronomy 4:23, "Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of Yah your Elohim, which he made with you, and make a graven image or the likeness of anything which Yah thy Elohim hath forbidden thee." And in Deuteronomy 6:13, "You shall fear Yah your Elohim, and serve or abide him, and take oaths, Shabbat, in his name." Shabbat, 7. Going on, "You shall not go after other Elohims, the Elohims of the people who are all around you." The people who are beseeching or reverencing the luminaries to worship their Elohims. In Deuteronomy 6:17, You shall diligently keep the commandments of Yah your Elohim, his testimonies, and his statutes, which he has commanded you. According to the book of Enoch 1, the fallen angels, or watchers, taught the people to make observations of the sun, moon, and stars. This would be directly opposed to a system of calculation using the number 7 as the base to determine Yah's covenant calendar, and the luminaries merely as signposts along the sides of the path. So the signs for seasons and days creates years. They show us where the line is. As you can see here in this diagram, the 365th day, we've gone too far. But the 360th day, we haven't gone far enough. The seasons and the number 7 determine the line. Strict adherence to the luminary cycles for any calendar cannot reflect Genesis or the covenants of Yah through his 7ing oaths. He is the Most High, not the luminaries. Exchanging Yah's covenant calendar for the observations of the pagans is why I believe that Yah demanded his people not worship him like the unbelievers honored their Elohims. This is why the Zadoks were unrelenting about the calendar and ultimately were killed trying to protect it. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Currently, we are in a cycle of 7-1-7-1 with the vernal equinoxes. Every 4th year, there is a 366th day, except when this occurs every 5th year instead of on the 4th year. So we see 7 cycles of 365, 365, 365, and the 4th year is 366 days, which spans 28 years total. And then one cycle of the 366th day occurring on the 5th year. So we have 4 years of 365 instead of 3 years of 365 days. Then the cycle of 7 begins again for another 28 years, followed by the cycle of 5 years, and then the 7 begins once again, etc. 28 years of 7 cycles equals 28, or 7 times 4. 5 years of 1 cycle, or 5 times 1. The number 7 represents the 7 days of the covenant of creation, and day 4 represents the door which opened time for seasons and years. 7 times 4 again is 28. 7 plus 4 is 11. That is our picture of seasons, days, and years according to Genesis 1:14. Those are the numbers involved. So day 3, which is Tuesday, concludes the biblical year, while day 4, Wednesday, begins the year in this cycle, showing an ancient recognition of a 364-day biblical year. There is a blessing of the sun called the Birkat Hakama, which refers to a little-known Jewish blessing that is recited to the Creator, thanking him for creating the sun. The blessing is recited when the sun completes its cycle every 28 years on a Tuesday at sundown. Jewish tradition says that when the sun completes this 28-year cycle, it has returned to its position when the world was created. Because the blessing needs to be said when the sun is visible, the blessing is postponed to the following day, or Wednesday morning. According to Judaism, the sun has a 28-year solar cycle known as Machzor Gadol. The blessing reads as this: Blessed are you, Yah our Elohim, King of the universe, maker of the works of creation. This seems to recognize that without the sun, the light, which was created on day 1, no works of creation would have been possible. No life can be sustained without the great light. So we can clearly see that the Zadok priest's solar calendar and belief that time began on day 4 or Wednesday and the cycle of the years ending on Tuesday was not completely lost or abandoned in Judaism. This remnant of the 364-day biblical year still exists. It has just been well hidden. Where is a precedence for entering the door and waiting 7 days to begin the year again? Did you know that Aaron and his sons went through a 7-day sanctification period before they could begin serving in the tabernacle? And this began on Abib 1, the second year that Israel came out of Egypt is when they erected the tabernacle. And we read in Leviticus 8:33 and 35, "And you shall not go out the door of the tabernacle of the congregation in 7 days, until the days of your consecration be at an end. For 7 days shall he consecrate you. Therefore ye shall abide at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation day and night for 7 days, and keep the charge of Yah, that ye die not, for so I am commanded." And again in Exodus 29:30, when the son of Aaron takes his place, they're commanded that the son that is priest in his stead shall put them on 7 days, the high priest's garments, when he cometh into the tabernacle of the congregation to minister in the holy place. So there is indeed a 7-day period of consecration to Yah Elohim, which did begin on Abib 1 in Exodus. Also consider Noah's 7 days. And Yah said unto Noah, "Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee I have seen righteous before me in this generation. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth." Genesis 7:1 and 4. And don't forget that Moses waited on Mount Sinai for 7 days before ascending to receive the 2 tables of stone containing the 10 commandments. There is biblical precedence for a 7-day waiting period, a period of consecration before Yah. So here are the basic choices as I understand the question today. 1. Never shift the weekly Sabbath days or the feast days by intercalating a full 7 days when the equinox passes the 364th day of the biblical year. Never break the 4th commandment or have any colliding or mixing feast days. That's the option that I believe is correct. Another option would be to observe only 364 days and never intercalate, which will cause the seasons to move past Abib 1. So you'll be starting your year in the 3rd gate. And eventually you will be looking for a first fruits barley harvest in February, and then January, and then December, and you'll be starting Abib 1 in any gate. Your third option would be to observe the 365th day every year and shift the weekly Sabbath and the feast days, which breaks the 7th-day Sabbath cycle every year. Or number 4, follow 2 separate calendars, one that never shifts the weekly Sabbath, and the other which shifts the feast days so that they randomly overlap, and then determine how to observe the overlapping Moedim, which is a question that the Jewish lunar calendar still tries to understand and answer today. Number 5, just keep following the Jewish lunar calendar. I am not compelling anyone to follow the calendar which I am currently observing. My purpose is to share what I have discovered and why I believe as I do today, not to compel anyone else or collect followers. We all answer directly to the Father, so we must all be praying and seeking His will and His direction. Now this chart shows the calendar of 364 days as it is evenly divided throughout the seasons. This chart shows the days between the equinoxes, which equals 364 days. Note that the vernal equinox is on the 364th day of the year, and Abib 1 falls on the 4th day of the week, mirroring the week of creation for the beginning of the calendar. At the end of the year, day 364 falls on the 3rd day of the week, as described in the book of Enoch 1. So you can clearly see that the equinox, meaning the sun and the stars, brought in the year exactly with 364 days. This precise year occurred in 2001, 2007, 2012, and 2018. Now, this has occurred many times previous to that, but these are the most recent occurrences. During this year, the autumnal equinox, which you can see is marked by the red box in the center left, occurs on the 187th day of the year. Because 364 is perfectly divisible by 7, you can see how year to year no shifting of Sabbath days would ever occur on a true 364-day calendar. That's only using 4 intercalary days, not a 5th or a 6th intercalary day. Also note that the 4 solar phenomena days or seasonal markers indicated by the blue boxes. The red lines show the demarcation of the 4 seasons. March 20, 2019, designated by the red box at the bottom of the graph, would be the 365th day if it were counted as part of the year instead of used as a bookend. The Zadok calendar, like the averaging of the 30 days per month in the stellar cycle, likewise averages the seasons throughout the year. This means that it is not based on literal observation of the 4 signs, but on an averaging of the signs within a 364-day year. Literal observations of the 4 signs, like the 12 constellations, can never provide a perfectly symmetrical year. It's impossible. Using calculations to average the 4 seasons, like the 12 months of 30 days each, creates seasons of 91 days, which is significant in that they never shift weekdays. Calendars which add the 365th day as an intercalary day will always, out of necessity, shift the weekdays and the feast days forward, because 365 is not perfectly divisible by 7. It's impossible, and it never will be perfectly divisible by 7. Thus, the addition of a 365th and 366th as a 5th and 6th intercalary day shifts and intentionally breaks the 7-day cycle. All attempts to follow a 2-calendar system with a non-shifting Sabbath day while shifting the feast days will cause the feast days and the weekly Sabbaths to collide randomly within the year. Colliding appointed times or moedim and Sabbaths is what occurs on the Jewish lunar calendar because it uses 2 separate calendar systems, a calculated weekly Sabbath and the lunar cycle for all the other feasts. But there's no indication of 2 calendar systems given in Leviticus 23, nor any remedy provided for which feasts and commanded rituals would take precedence over another if they were to mix. In fact, the Jewish rabbis debate in the Talmud and the Mishnah on how to solve the problems of overlapping feast days and Sabbaths. It just seems messy and disorganized. Nothing like the elegant mathematical precision observed in the scriptures. So my question was, how do we follow a 364-day only calendar which does not shift the Sabbath days and or the feast days, causing them to randomly collide and mix during the year, or break the 4th commandment to observe the Sabbath every 7th day? The only solution I've found which can remedy all of these issues is by collecting all of the 365th and 366th bookend days like chips, and then cashing them in all at once in a solid 7-day unit of time, which doesn't violate the 4th commandment. It's simple and yet follows the biblical system of counting in units of 7. I also discovered that this system balances the 4 seasons much better and appears to have a built-in 7-day period just for this purpose, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So, by adding 7 days to the calendar, we see what would have been the 8th day of Abib now becomes Abib 1. The Dead Sea Scrolls indicate that Abib 1 is a special appointed time, or moed. So when we find that the 8th day of Abib is sometimes called a moed in 4Q 326, it appears to lend support to adding 7 days and having the 8th day as Abib 1, which is called a moed. This is not the same word used to designate a weekly Sabbath in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now I'm calling this example Enoch Calendar 1. This is a popular Enoch calendar method which counts 365 days and then begins Abib 1 on the following day after the vernal equinox. Because the calendar has 365 and 366 days each year instead of 364 only with only 4 intercalary days, the Sabbath shifts forward by 1 or 2 days. You can also see how the 7-day cycle is broken at the end of each year when the Sabbath day occurs 8 or 9 days later as it shifts from a Monday Sabbath to a Tuesday Sabbath. Naturally, the feast days also shift forward 1 or 2 days each year. This calendar recognizes the 365th day, but it does it at the beginning of each year. You can see the green boxes all represent the Sabbath. In column 1, in the first year, the Sabbath falls on the 2nd day of the week. In the next year, you can see that the Sabbath falls on the 3rd day of the week all year long. And at the bottom, in the blue boxes, you can see that there are 5 intercalary days added at the end of the year. Now this is a second method which is very similar to the first. I'm calling this the Enoch Calendar 2 method. This Enoch Calendar method is similar to the first method and has basically the same result, except that they ignore the 365th day at the beginning of the year, but then they add it at the end of the year. So they call the day of the vernal equinox Abib 1. But at the end of the year, you can see that there are still 5 intercalary days in the blue boxes. However, using this method, the number of days between weekly Sabbaths at the end of each year is 8 or 9 days. And you can see that the green boxes in the first column is the Sabbath occurring on the first day of the week, which we call Sunday. In the second column, the Sabbath has shifted forward to now the 2nd day of the week, which we call Monday. This is because they absolutely are shifting days by using a 5th and a 6th intercalary day rather than only 4 intercalary days. Now this slide shows an example of a non-Enoch calendar. This calendar ignores the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Book of Enoch and claims to be simply a straight biblical calendar. It follows 12 straight months of 30 days, equaling 360 days. Then the calendar has 5 non-days before beginning the count again on the day after the vernal equinox. Like the Jewish calendar, this follows 2 systems, straight calculation for the weekly Sabbath and the stellar cycle for the feast days. Because this calendar uses 2 different systems, you can see where the feast days and the weekly Sabbaths overlap as they do on the Jewish calendar. The seasons are completed, although cut short on day 360. You can see where this particular year, day 190, the Day of Atonement, creates a 1.5 day Sabbath. This is marked in gold and red in the second year shown, which is the second column. In the very last column of green, you can see where the Day of Atonement lands on the Sabbath in the middle of the year. This chart shows a no intercalation ever Enoch calendar. This method keeps Abib 1 on the 4th day of every week and never shifts the weekly Sabbath. This method ignores the seasons as it loses 1 to 2 days each year, going out of alignment with the season of spring. So the vernal equinox passes Abib 1 and then continues moving forward. Within 20 years, Abib 1 would actually be in February. This calendar system is very similar to the straight lunar calendar of the Muslims, which is also not tied in any way to the seasons and therefore does not align with the seasons. Obviously, I reject this calendar system based on the fact that the biblical calendar is agricultural and does require that you remain within the seasons. Now, this is the Zadok priestly calendar method. You can see here that I have laid out 3 years, 3 columns. The first column is year 1, the second column is year 2, and the third column is year 3. Now, I believe this year begins back in 1997 or 1998. As I have done all of these calendars for multiple years to see how they literally would fall between the years and how the calendar would function over a longer period of time. As you can see, in this year, Abib 1 in the first column is March the 26th. Abib 1 in the second column is March the 25th. And Abib 1 in the third column is March the 24th. You can see that all the green boxes remain on the 7th day. There's never any shifting there. At the bottom, you can see the blue boxes. There are only 364 days and only 4 intercalary days as well. The blue boxes mark the seasonal marker days, and the red boxes show you where the equinoxes and solstices fall in relation to the first day of each season. So you can see that the summer solstice occurred 4 days before the season began on day 92. In the second year, the summer solstice occurred 3 days before the season began on day 92. In the third year, the summer solstice occurred 2 days before the season began on day 92. Also note that the first day of each month follows a specific pattern. Wednesday, the next month being Friday, and the third month being on a Sunday. And then in the second season, the first day is on Wednesday, the second month of the summer season begins on Friday, and the third month on Sunday, and so forth throughout the entire year. Here is the last 3 years of this cycle. You can see that in the first column, Abib 1 occurred on March 22nd. Also note, in the center of column 1, that September 22nd of that year was the autumnal equinox, which occurred 2 days after the beginning of the 7th month, or Yom Teruah, which is always on day 183. In the next year, you can see that day 183 is marked as the beginning of the 7th month, and the autumnal equinox occurred 3 days later on day 186. At this point, because there's a shift of the vernal equinox going 366 days rather than 365, this required that the 7-day intercalation be done after 5 years instead of after 6 years, which is the normal intercalation period. It actually goes 5-6-6, 5-6-6, 5-6-6. At the bottom of the second column, or the second year, which would actually be the 5th year of the 6 years provided here, the vernal equinox occurred on Wednesday, the 4th day of the week. So it did not occur before the end of the 364th day. This requires a 7-day intercalation unit of time to be added. Your 7 plus your 4 brings you to the number 11, 1-1. By adding the 7 days, the equinox now falls well behind the beginning of the year on Abib 1. So the following year, March 27th is Abib 1. Also note that the summer solstice occurs 5 days before the first day of summer. The same with the autumnal equinox, which now occurs before the beginning of the 7th month. The seasonal doors all now occur prior to the calculated beginning of each season. This actually balances the seasons better than any of the other calendars, for the simple fact that on the Enoch 1 and the Enoch 2 calendars, as well as the non-Enoch calendar, the 7th month, according to the observational seasonal marker, always occurs 5 days after the beginning of the 7th month on Yom Teruah. The Zadok priestly calendar, however, provides that there are years as the seasons are being balanced when the sign of the autumnal equinox will occur on the 31st day of the 6th month, as mentioned in the book of Enoch. However, none of the Enoch calendars will ever allow that to happen. That is simply impossible. Now, while I do not intercalate for the purpose of balancing the seasons between the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, it appears that Yah placed a natural 7-day guide, similar to an old-fashioned slide ruler, which again provides bookends and confirms when to adjust. 2 witnesses that the time for a 7-day intercalation is just ahead. First, the vernal equinox lands on Tuesday, the 364th day, making it impossible to begin Abib 1 in the 4th gate the following year. And the second witness is the autumnal equinox occurs on the 186th or 187th day on normal years, which means that it will exceed the 7-day unit of time without intercalation the following year. So 2 witnesses showing us that intercalation is just ahead. Observe in this diagram, number 1 and number 2 show you the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox in the year prior to a 7-day intercalation. Number 1 shows the vernal equinox occurring on the 3rd day, which is a Tuesday. And then Abib 1 naturally begins the following day on Wednesday or the 4th day of the week. Number 2 shows you the autumnal equinox, which occurs normally on day 187. Now here you can see the solar and stellar year following the 7-day intercalation. Number 3 shows the vernal equinox has now fallen 1 week behind the beginning of the year on Abib 1. So the 8th day now becomes the Moed, the first day of the new year. And in number 4, you can see where the autumnal equinox has gone from the 187th day of the year to the 181st day of the year. Remember that day 183 is always the first day of the 7th month. So you can see where the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox have slidden basically like a slide ruler between the 180th and the 187th day. This 7-day system is naturally built in to show you when to begin intercalating the next year. So the Zadok calendar is the only solar calendar which can ever produce the autumnal equinox on the 31st day of the 6th month, as specified in the book of Enoch, chapter 72, 19 through 20. And of course, 91 plus 91 equals 182 days, which is the 31st day of the 6th month. This is because there's always 187 days, except for when there's 188 every 4th year, between the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, as I mentioned earlier. On the Enoch 1 and 2 calendars, the autumnal equinox will always occur on day 187 or day 188, which is 5 days after the 31st of the 6th month, or 6 days. This is a 7-day difference, which should get our attention. It is the perfect picture of an old-fashioned slide ruler, but with only 7 days as the units of measurement. When we intercalate the 7 days on the vernal equinox, it actually creates an adjustment between the 7 days of the autumnal equinox and the stellar cycle. During the year of adjustment, or the following year, The autumnal equinox will occur precisely on day 182, or the 31st day of the 6th month, and the first day of the 7th month, which always falls on day 183, will be the next day. 7 days divided by 2 equals 3.5 days, which means that day 183 is the perfect balancing point between the solar and the stellar cycles. Day 182 is always a Tuesday, and day 183 always begins the next season on Wednesday and is the Feast of Trumpets. I have charted hundreds of years of vernal equinox cycles, and the intercalation is always done on the 5th or 6th year, which is how long it takes the vernal equinox to pass the 364th day on Tuesday and return once again to Wednesday, or bypass it and jump ahead 2 days to Thursday. At the autumnal equinox, you can simply add 4 weekdays and know exactly upon which weekday the following vernal equinox will occur. It's simple and would have given the priest plenty of time to prepare for the intercalation week, or the week of sanctification. The biblical calendar is a revelation of Yah Elohim, and it cannot be simply observed with human eyes. It's an apocalypse, which simply means an unveiling. It literally reflects the holy covenant promises of Yah. Yah is called the Most High because he exists above the luminary cycles, which are merely his creation. Why did Yah specifically command that his people not become like the pagans and worship the sun and the moon and the stars? Because when the pagans looked up, the highest object of worship that they could see were the luminaries, and for those who do not know Yah, that is the highest they can ever receive of divine authority and mandate. The pagans created idols, images of that which they could see and touch. They made their Elohims conform to them, and then walked in what seemed right in their own eyes. They made up all the rules. Why did Yeshua say that we are to walk by faith and not by sight? Faith in what? Faith that we are in the holy covenant of Yah Elohim. Why did Yeshua say that the kingdom of Yah does not come by observation? Because when you walk in the holy covenant, it is hidden deep within you, and your works or fruits are the signs which point to your covenant status. But your works are not the covenant itself, which is why your works can never save you. This is exactly how the Zadok calendar functions. The sun and the stars are signs which point to the holy covenant, the oath or the sevening that Yah made with us. But they are not the holy covenant, nor could they ever be, because the covenant reflects the number 7, the perfection and divine authority of Yah. None of the luminary cycles are based on 7. The biggest obstacle to understanding the Zadok calendar is demanding to see or observe it with your eyes, not as signs which point towards the covenant calendar, but as the objects which dictate the covenant itself. Rather than looking above the luminaries and seeing what they are pointing towards, we focus on the objects themselves, like the pagans did, insisting that we must see the biblical calendar with our own eyes in the direct cycles of the sun, the moon, and the stars. But they are signs which do not point to themselves, but to a much higher and greater divine authority who can make and keep covenant oaths with his creation. When we look at the sun, we should ask, who gave the sun its light? We should recognize that Yeshua, the Son of Righteousness, always pointed to his Father and not to himself. He said that there is only one who is good, and that was the Father who put life everlasting in him. Yeshua, the light of the world, had one commandment, which was to point us back to the Father and to his unchanging covenant of life everlasting. In Isaiah 42:16 we read, "And I will bring the blind by a way that they knew not. I will lead them in paths that they have not known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked things straight. These things will I do unto them, and not forsake them." I believe that the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery was like the earth opening up to help the woman. We read in Daniel 11 about this Antichrist figure a vile man who would gain access to Israel and the temple through intrigue, and that his heart would be against the Holy Covenant. It says that he would have intelligence with or conspire with the unrighteous and reward those who forsook the Holy Covenant. In Daniel 11:32-33, it says, "And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their Elohim shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by spoil, many days." This is what I believe happened to the Zadok, or the righteous priests, when Antiochus Epiphanes conspired with the Hellenistic Jews to destroy the biblical calendar. I believe that this will happen again someday, but first the calendar must be restored, which points us directly to the Holy Covenant of Yah Elohim. I believe that it represents the faith of the saints who believe in Yeshua and keep the commandments of Yah. It's not the calendar which is hated as much as the covenant promises and the covenant maker that it embodies. The Antichrist will perform many signs and wonders, visual observations, which will deceive many and lead them astray. The war scroll between the sons of light and the sons of darkness predicts that a calendar battle would ensue 3 times before the final end. I believe that the second battle was after Yeshua died, leading up to the second temple destruction. And now we may be seeing the beginning of the third battle, which will end with Yeshua returning to win the war and uphold the Holy Covenant. In Romans 8:19, Paul writes, "For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly awaits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim." However, I want to warn again that even if you follow the correct biblical calendar, it will not and cannot save you. Keeping the feast, saying Yod-Heh Vav-Heh correctly, or having perfect theology will not save you on Judgment Day. We must all work on our salvation with fear and trembling, knowing that the condition of our hearts are not hidden from Yah Elohim. Heart issues are the hardest to battle and to overcome. He that saith he is in the light and hateth his brother is in darkness even until now. 1 John 2:9. And in 1 John 3:14, we know that we have passed from death unto life because we love the brethren. He that loveth not his brother abideth in death. How can we profess to be the children of light who walk in the light when our hearts are so evil against our own brothers and sisters? Like Yeshua said, it is not what goes into our mouths which defiles us, but rather what comes out of our mouths which defiles us. Our tongues are truly unruly members. I may not have the calendar perfect, and that may be the only thing I've said so far that you even agree with. But let's not beat each other up and fail the ultimate test. Let's be sober-minded and diligent, walking in faith, knowing that the good works which Yah has begun in us, He will complete, because Yah can and will keep all of His oaths. Now here is a small chart giving you a quick calendar comparison. The points above are obviously parameters which I find to be the most relevant. You may not agree with me, and that's okay. We can still be friends. I disagree with many of the calendars for the various reasons that I've already stated, but I have friends who follow all of the ones that I've listed. I don't believe that you will lose your salvation in Yeshua because you intercalated the calendar wrong or pronounced Yod-Heh Vav-Heh incorrectly. If you believe that, then you need to get saved and focus on your heart before worrying about biblical calendars. Sometimes I wonder if the calendar issue is part of a test to see how we will treat one another. This subject brings out the worst in many people. However, on Judgment Day, you may find out that your calendar was correct, but you will be judged on the condition of your heart and how you treated your brothers and sisters in Yeshua, not the calendar. So please, let's keep this topic in the proper perspective. As I've said before, I'm not saying that I have the calendar intercalated 100% accurately. This is my research and the conclusions I've drawn based on what I've found thus far. I'm sharing this in the hopes that this information will glorify Yah Elohim and prove that the heavens truly do declare His glory. I believe that all of us who are discussing the question of the biblical calendar are doing so out of a heartfelt desire to obey and glorify our Creator. And that is something that should unite us rather than divide us. We are already small in number. So let's not beat each other up in the process. Thank you so much for listening to this series on the Zadok calendar and the Dead Sea Scrolls. I only hope that this study has given you some information to think about and to consider. Thank you for your time, and shalom.